Hey, welcome back, everybody. Good Tuesday. Hopefully, we're having an okay start to the week out there. Although all eyes are on the Gulf of Mexico as major Category 5, or at least once was and likely will be again, Category 5 Hurricane Milton continues to turn towards the Florida Gulf Coast here. And unfortunately, this really could be almost a worst case scenario depending on the track it takes here towards the Gulf Coast. Now, cities like Tampa, Fort Myers, Sarasota, St. Petersburg, really just up and down through that corridor, even up into north central Florida from Ocala, Gainesville, back up towards Jacksonville. A lot of the state is going to get impacts out of this one, and unfortunately, they're going to be major hurricane impacts, and we are very concerned about storm surge. I've been seeing the videos out of portions of I-75. A lot of people, luckily, are leaving. Remember, though, if you're seeing those videos and you're thinking, well, okay, it's too late for me to leave, the roads are backed up, you don't need to go super far. You just need to go 5, 10, 15, 20 miles inland just to get away from the water. You can ride out the wind. However, you cannot ride out the ocean. The ocean does not care who you are or what you have. It is going to treat everybody the same, and really the best thing to do is just to get away from the beaches and those low-lying areas. Now, the one thing I will also add, the storm's moving a little bit slower than maybe we thought yesterday. Landfall now looks more like very early into the morning hours of Thursday or very late overnight Wednesday. So probably about 6, maybe even 12 hours later than we were originally thinking. So that does give you a little bit more time to prepare. And again, really today is going to be the last day to finish up any of those preparations. As you can see, the storm is getting very close. And now I will ask, if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. That's a great way for more people to find this video. It's also a great way for you to stay in the loop and stay updated. Every time there's new model guidance, I will immediately post it and let you know here every morning, and then usually during active times, multiple times a day as well. Also, like the video while you're there, hit that bell for the latest notifications, comment, let me know where you're watching from, and please consider sharing the video with somebody that you know in this part of Florida. I've got a lot of family in the Fort Myers area, and I've been sending them their way. And luckily, they've been watching and listening and are evacuating or from those low-lying areas. So again, the power of word to mouth can really do a lot to help save lives here, and let's try to get that going. All right. I will also add, again, I'm sorry, I have been very not so into the comments. I am in the middle of midterm week, and it's not that I'm forgetting about you. Also, I wish I could be doing night videos, but unfortunately, it's test after test after test this week. So kind of just unfortunate timing, but again, so I do apologize about that. All right, that's way more talking than I wanted to do at the beginning. Let's go ahead and dive into Major Hurricane Milton and taking a look at satellite. The storm has weakened somewhat, and I really don't want to talk about weakening so much because whenever you weaken from 185 miles an hour to 155 miles an hour, I mean, we're still talking major, basically Category 5 hurricane here. And again, it's probably going to fluctuate back into Category 5 at some point this afternoon. But again, this is the same strength that Hurricane Ian was whenever it made landfall. Just to put this into perspective, yeah, it weakened some, but this thing is not magically now just some weak storm. And the same theory there applies whenever I talk about the storm weakening upon landfall. That does not mean that impacts are not going to be there. That does not mean we're not going to see storm surge. We are still going to see a major hurricane make landfall into the west coast of Florida. And that's the big point I want you to take home, okay? Now, taking a look at the storm itself, again, still a rather small storm. We went through an eye wall replacement cycle overnight. That's why the winds came down a little bit and the pressure rose. It is beginning to finish that process, and it is now clearing out a new eye. And what these eye wall replacement cycles do is they expand the storm. They make them bigger. So unfortunately, that makes the storm surge worse, even if it does bring the max winds in the eye down a little bit. So again, to say the storm has weakened is a very relative term to use. But either way, again, it's still a very, just really mesmerizing storm. A lot of lightning in the eye wall there. It is once again becoming very symmetrical, and now is officially kind of beginning to pull northward here towards the state of Florida. And we'll take a look at that track here in just a second. All right, I did very briefly want to show this to you. We're not going to talk about the other things in the Atlantic today. Again, I'm just going to talk about Milton, and then we'll talk about the lower 48 weather afterwards. But again, just note Leslie is out here, and we have 2 areas to watch. Both I am not concerned about for impacts to the United States or really any land at all outside of some rain on going into the Bahamas, and same for the Cabo Verde Islands. But again, not a problem, so we're not going to talk about those. All eyes are just going to stay focused here on Hurricane Milton. All right, latest track from the National Hurricane Center here, and it really hasn't changed all that much. Again, still expecting a major hurricane, and I'll go ahead and add this. They are expecting this to re-strengthen back into a Category 5 hurricane this afternoon. So I keep referring this or to Milton as a Category 5 storm. I'm just doing that ahead of time, assuming by the time many of you are watching this, it very well could be upgraded to that. And again, the difference between a very strong Category 4 and a weak Category 5, I mean, at that point, we're really just we're doing too much, so we're not gonna worry about that. But what I want you to note, though, is kind of over the state of Florida itself. Latest forecast continues to call for a major Category 3, borderline Category 4 hurricane moving right into or near the Tampa Bay area. Now, the timing has gone back a little bit. This is calling for about 2 a.m. Tuesday morning. Yesterday, it looked like 8 p.m. Wednesday. Now looks a lot more like deep into the night of Wednesday and into the early morning hours of Thursday. So I might have said Tuesday morning. It's Thursday morning. Sorry. 2 a.m. Thursday morning is the latest predicted landfall time. And again, 125 mile an hour major hurricane. Again, I don't want you. You're going to hear all over the internet that the storm is going to weaken upon landfall, and I'm going to continue to say that as well. But I don't want you to hear that and assume that you're out of the woods because of that. So again, just remember, a major hurricane, almost Category 4 hurricane, making landfall near the Tampa Bay area. Now, I will add, it is going to be very important where in this cone does it make landfall. Does it make landfall right over kind of the Bradenton area, kind of like this cone suggests, and right through the Southern Bay? If that's the case, the worst of the storm surge will be down into Sarasota and into the Fort Myers and Port Charlotte area. Does it go a little bit further north in there and make landfall near Clearwater or Holiday? If that's the case, that is worst case scenario for the Tampa Bay area as a whole, as you're going to get major hurricane force winds just funneling a lot of Gulf of Mexico water into the bay, and we could see potentially 15 feet of storm surge in a scenario like that. And I was watching a video yesterday that they apparently play for emergency managers in the state of Florida as a worst case scenario for the Tampa Bay area, folks. And it was really eerie to watch because it is almost exactly this track and what is happening. The only difference is intensity. In that case, it was a Category 5 at landfall. This one, again, maybe probably a Category 3 or 4. But the track is eerily similar, we saw, or I looked at the results from that kind of storm in that, I guess, mock video, if you want to call it that. And again, obviously, just devastating impacts into the Tampa Bay area. So, really, this is one you don't want to mess around with. And again, not just the Tampa Bay area, down through Port Charlotte, Fort Myers, Bonita Springs, Cape Coral, Northport, even up into portions of the Big Bend. The northern part of the storm is probably going to be the worst in terms of wind and rain. So, to the north side of wherever this makes landfall, we're going to get a big area of a lot of rain and a lot of wind, and we'll break all that down and talk about it. But just, again, keeping all that in mind. All right, watches, warnings, advisories. These kind of, I know the colors are kind of annoying here because they're not super well separated, but this corridor here that you see these more bright pink colors in between those two black lines, those are hurricane warnings. The more darker maroonish red colors are tropical storm warnings. So hurricane warnings from Tampa, Orlando, even up towards, let's see, let me zoom into some communities here. Palm Beach, Palm Bay, Daytona Beach. Again, I said Orlando, Lakeland, Sarasota, even back down towards Fort Myers, Cape Coral, Ocala under a hurricane warning. And then to the south through Lake Okeechobee, Miami, and into the Keys, tropical storm warnings, and then tropical storm warnings up into the Jacksonville area, and tropical storm watches all the way up into Charleston, South Carolina, where again, as the storm is pulling away here, it could get enough of that northern bit of precipitation to scrape the Georgia and South Carolina coast and bring tropical storm conditions, as well as some storm surge as well. It's something that not a lot of people are talking about, but you folks in Charleston, maybe 1 to 3 feet of storm surge is not out of the question with this storm. All right, I wanted to check this really quickly. Hurricane hunters are currently flying in and around the storm. They're about to make another pass through the eye, so if I can remember, we will come back and look at this before the video is over. But just know that they are in there. Finding pressure, again, around 930 millibars, and that is expected to drop once again throughout the day today. Again, weakened a good 30 millibars overnight as it went through that eye wall replacement cycle. But as I showed you on Saturday, the storm is getting its act back together and likely to make a run once again at Category 5 status. All right, so I did want to show this to you. These are potential tracks from our European ensembles, and we've got a bit of a split between the model guidance. A lot of the global models, and let's see if I can zoom this in even more, we will, because we'll get really nitty gritty. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so a lot of the hurricane models have been much further north in landfall projections than the ensembles and our global models. These are the European ensembles. The furthest north that any of these go is just north of Tampa Bay, and then we have a cluster even as far south as just north of Fort Myers. So this would be quite different than what a lot of the hurricane models are showing. But again, I just want to note this, that we still have a range of possibilities for landfall, and that range is going to be very important. Like I talked about, does it go this way? Does it go this way? Does it go right over Fort Myers? There is still a pretty big spread in possibilities, considering that we're only 2 days away, but it's just the orientation of the Florida coastline. I mean, this may only be a 50-mile difference in some of these places, but that still has huge impacts just due to the way that the coast is shaped, and also the way that these population centers are spread out along the West Coast. So again, just want to note that real quick, and let's go ahead now and take a look at some model guidance. And we're not going to take a look at a ton of models. We're just going to dive into the ones that I think are handling this the best, and then we'll go into impacts, and then we'll finish up the video with what's going on today and through the next week across the lower 48. I'm going to take a sip of coffee very quickly, though. All right, coffee, good to go. Let's go ahead and hit the ground running. Okay, latest GFS model. A couple disclaimers here. I don't want you to focus so much on the strength of the storm with the GFS model, because I think it's, let me phrase that. Upon landfall, I think it's doing pretty good with strength, but now to landfall, I think it's not doing so well with strength. So don't focus so much on the weakening trend with this. We'll take a look at a hurricane model, which I think is doing a much better job of that here in a moment. But what I do want you to focus on here are impacts and the track of the storm. So here we go. We'll move this ahead into time, and we will get into our afternoon tonight, or excuse me, afternoon today into tonight and into early tomorrow. And at that point, here we go. We again have Major Hurricane Milton beginning to work towards, again, likely the Tampa Bay area is going to be the most likely for landfall. But again, there's still that range of possibilities we talked about. And at this point, going into Wednesday afternoon, storm surge is going to begin to increase along the west coast of Florida as the storm moves in. And also, the storm is expected to expand in size upon approach. So here we go. This is as the sun is setting Wednesday. This is likely, this is when the storm surge is really going to pick up through the Fort Myers area. Again, potentially 6 to 8 feet of surge in that part of Florida there through Port Charlotte, again, through Fort Myers. Through Sanibel Island, a lot of those different communities could get it good. Probably not quite as bad as Ian, but go ahead and compare it to Ian, just so you get the right idea of what could be on the way, storm surge wise. And then here we go, landfall late Wednesday night into early Thursday morning. GFS brings this thing quite literally right over Tampa Bay. And again, this would be just catastrophic storm surge through areas in and around Tampa Bay, likely just south of Tampa Bay into the Sarasota area would get really just probably record-breaking surge on us. I think someone in the Tampa Bay region definitely will break their storm surge record with this storm. But again, Bradenton, Sarasota, down to Venice would get it the worst with a track that goes right through the bay like this. And I will note as well, you'll notice the structure of the storm here. See how all this rain is kind of on the north side? This is going to be another problem with the impact forecast. Now to the south and to the, or just kind of in this area of the storm, kind of this southern quadrant, that is where we will see the worst of the surge. But I think the worst of the wind and heavy rainfall will actually be in kind of this more northern quadrant. And this is all due to some wind shear and dry air that, again, is going to help to weaken the storm slightly. That is going to kind of erode the southern side of the storm. So places like Fort Myers and kind of areas further south into the cone and through Lake Okeechobee, I don't really think you're going to get a whole lot of rain out of this. Now, definitely you will get some, don't get me wrong, but less of a flooding threat down that way. It's more of a storm surge threat down in that part. But to the north side of the storm, again, more of a flooding threat, very heavy rain threat and strong wind. And then obviously surge kind of here right into the center and just south of the center as well. So kind of remember that whenever you see these different tracks that the storm takes, different sides of the storm will get different impacts. All right, so that gets us into Thursday morning by the time we're waking up. This crossing the I-4 corridor, getting into Orlando with hurricane conditions, up into Sanford, Florida, and then into the Daytona Beach area, even down into Ocala, getting very heavy rain, very strong winds, and that flooding potential. And at this point, I will mention surge will also be a concern on the northeast coast of Florida through Jacksonville. We're going to get this flow back around the storm here Thursday morning. Same story for southeast Georgia and coastal South Carolina, Charleston Point southbound. Going to see that onshore flow begin to pick up. Also still seeing onshore flow into the Fort Myers and Tampa area at this point, just weakening with that onshore flow. So again, we talk about worst case scenario. Look at how much of the state of Florida is getting surge with a track like this. You're getting it on the East Coast and the West Coast all at the same time as the storm is crossing over the state. And I'll tell you, I-75 and I-4 travel here through north central Florida is going to really be a bit of a nightmare. I can tell you as somebody who storm chased Helene a week ago, I mean, trying to get out of Greenville, Florida and getting back to Jacksonville, it was pine tree after pine tree after pine tree down on the road. And it'll be less bad in this region just because the trees, again, are probably a little more separated from the interstate. But still, we're going to get a lot of trees down with this. We're going to have power outages and all the normal hurricane problems that you get before, luckily, Thursday afternoon, the storm begins to work offshore. And this will be a close call for the Carolinas. Well, let me rephrase that. This will be a close call for southern South Carolina and Georgia. You'll notice, again, all this heavy rain on the north side. If the storm is shifted north by a little bit, that could impact coastal Georgia and, again, Charleston Point southbound with some gusty winds and heavy rainfall. But right now, it looks more likely to stay just south, I think, of that region in the long run. All right, so that was the GFS, and I guess I can back it up a little bit more here. Sorry. This all pulls out. This is Friday afternoon. Again, all good. Nice fall area, even kind of funneling in at that point for most of us. So I will quickly mention that. Okay, hurricane model, half speed model. Kudos to the half speed model. I mean, this model performed better than any other model yesterday with the structure of the storm. So, I mean, if you win once, we'll keep using it, and I'll go ahead and show it today. So I think it'll probably do a pretty good job here of showing what we are looking at. So we're going to do a zoomed out view, and then we're going to do a zoomed in view. Then we'll talk impacts, and then kind of keep on trucking along here. All right, here we go. So again, the storm kind of, again, has leveled off a little bit this morning. You'll notice even kind of weakening a little bit through the early morning hours. But by this afternoon and getting into tonight, the storm re-strengthens a little bit. And by the time we're getting into 8 a.m. tomorrow, we're back down into Category 5 status, folks. And this is why storm surge is such a big deal. I don't care if the storm is weakening upon landfall. Look at how close this is. This is a major Category 5 storm. Maybe 200 miles off the coast of Florida. And this is going to just be pumping water into the West Coast. And again, this is why storm surge is such a big concern, even if during that final kind of 12 hours of the storm, it does weaken some and then makes landfall around 950, 960 millibars. Still a big time storm surge. And this model will again zoom in, but really is a worst case scenario for Tampa Bay, and then kind of crosses over the state, gets back out into the Atlantic, and dies out. So let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit more and get a precipitation look at this model. And we're going to kind of skip ahead a little bit here into time. All right, so again, tomorrow morning, Wednesday, 917 millibars, back into major Category 5 status. And at this point, these outer bands begin to impact the Florida Gulf Coast. So I know it's really hard to see here, but right here is the Florida coastline. This is Tampa Bay. This is kind of the beginning of Port Charlotte there. And again, it'll come more into frame as we get closer. But either way, Wednesday increasing that tornado threat through the west coast of Florida, Tampa Point south. Again, getting these kind of rounds of rain and rounds of increased storm surge. And here we go. This is Wednesday afternoon, a major, probably Category 4 storm here just off the coast of Florida. And you'll notice again that these little individual cells are going to pose a big-time tornado threat through Fort Myers, even south of Fort Myers, up through Tampa Bay. And also, anytime that these move in, that's going to even increase the surge and the wind. And this is likely when we will be getting that 6 to maybe 7, 8 feet of storm surge through Port Charlotte, again, through the Fort Myers area. And then that surge increasing into Tampa Bay through the afternoon and evening. And then eventually, here we go, we're going to get close to landfall. And watch what happens with the storm. It looks real mean right here. And then it begins to look a little less mean and a little less mean. The reason for that, again, is dry air and wind shear kind of wrapping into the southern end of the system. So this is why I said we're not going to get nearly as much rain south of where this makes landfall, even if the storm surge is the worst. Again, look at how tight these isobars here. This little stretch right here. See that is a extremely tight pressure gradient. That's going to be extremely strong winds, and the orientation of that is onshore. And unfortunately, with this track right into Tampa Bay, again, catastrophic storm surge. Really, again, cannot hit this home enough. This is worst case scenario track with this model. And it's not the only model showing it. Plenty of models show this right into or just north of Tampa Bay. And again, this would bring the worst of the storm surge. Now, again, I talked about the southern side of this doesn't look quite as ugly. That's true. The northern side, though, we still have a fully intact major hurricane eye wall, much kind of like how Helene was, where the northern side was, a lot stronger probably than the southern side upon landfall. Similar story going to be likely here with Milton. And this is where we're going to get those strong hurricane force sustained winds. Again, just to the north of the storm. In this scenario, those northern Tampa suburbs getting in on the worst probably of the tree damage and the flooding, as that's where the worst of the rain is. That continues to work inland overnight Thursday into the early morning hours of, overnight Wednesday into the early morning hours of Thursday. Again, hurricane conditions from Ocala through the Orlando area, crossing the state into Daytona Beach, and then by Thursday evening and overnight, getting back out into the open ocean, and things get better for our Friday. All right, so how strong are those winds going to get? Well, let's take a look here at latest GFS. I'm going to back this up just a little bit. This is evening of Wednesday into Thursday. This is when winds begin to pick up through the coastal regions. Fort Myers points north through Tampa, beginning to gust into tropical storm strength, and then near landfall. We're going to actually, you know what I can do? Sorry, let me zoom into Florida itself. This would have been a way better idea, and then we'll zoom back out and look at the southeast very briefly. All right, here we go. So 8 p.m. Wednesday. Again, time is at the top there. You'll see Wednesday, October 9th, 2024, 8 p.m. So there you go. That's local Florida time here for tomorrow. And here we go. Again, tropical storm conditions picking up here along the Florida coastline for our Wednesday night. And then here's landfall. Look at these wind gusts. Sarasota, 105 miles an hour. Cape Coral, probably near 60. Fort Myers, maybe 70, 80 mile an hour wind gusts. Tampa picking up on the wind gusts. And then we move this ahead in a time and you're thinking, all right, well, Tampa only 52. That's not that bad. That's because Tampa's actually in the eye on this frame. So, if you zoom out of there, we're gusting near 90 around Tampa and, through these surrounding regions. So, wind will be a concern here. Obviously, surge is the biggest concern I have. Wind will be a concern. Rainfall will be a concern. Notice we get into 5 a.m. Orlando gusting into hurricane strength. Tampa still at hurricane strength wind gusts. Gainesville, Jacksonville, tropical storm wind gusts. And then Daytona Beach, Palm Bay start to get in on these big time wind gusts. Port St. Lucie, and down even into Miami and West Palm Beach, tropical storm wind gusts. And then that continues, and again, luckily kind of pulls out of here by the afternoon. But again, I'll just bring this to the worst of it. Again, I know I keep saying the word again. Major hurricane landfall into the west coast of Florida. I know you're going to continue to hear weakening hurricane, this, blah, 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 blah. Major hurricane landfall, catastrophic storm surge, life-threatening impacts. Those are the words I want you to take home today, okay? Okay. I will briefly zoom out again just because I know we have folks in the southeast that are wondering about their wind gusts, and we'll very briefly touch on this. Here we go. So again, South Georgia into southern South Carolina, we could gust to tropical storm strength at times, those of you that are in those tropical storm watches, but nothing too crazy, probably gusting in and around 40 at times. Other than that, really not all that bad in the winds outside of the state of Florida. So I will very briefly show that. Okay, that's the model guidance. Let's dive into these impacts one by one. Storm surge. Number one concern with this system, 10 to 15 feet of storm surge into Tampa Bay. Helene, that was like 6 to 8 feet of storm surge. So we're doubling that through much of Tampa Bay with this forecasted storm surge. So you thought Helene was bad, double that. Likely almost every bridge in and around this region will have water splashing on it. Portions of kind of the west side there through St. Petersburg likely could be an island at points here due to the storm surge. Again, really catastrophic stuff. Now, further south in there, Port Charlotte, Charlotte Harbor, Fort Myers, into Bonita Beach, Sanibel Island, all those regions, 6 to 10 feet of storm surge. Again, if we're on the higher end of that, we're going to rival Ian in storm surge. Now, probably not quite as bad as Ian. Maybe subtract a couple feet, but you don't need to be much less. Let me phrase that. You don't need to be on Ian's level to have major impacts. So again, big problems there. Northward, Yankeetown down to, let's see, and Cloth River, maybe is what we're going to call that. Let me give a town name instead. That would be better. Probably down to the Tarpon Springs area. Maybe 5 to 10 feet of storm surge. And then look at this, the east coast of Florida too. A lot of people not talking about this. Edisto Beach all the way down to Sebastian Inlet, 2 to 4 feet of storm surge, 3 to 5 feet into the Jacksonville area. So this is not just a West Coast problem. Again, nearly the entire state of Florida, beaches are going to see some sort of storm surge out of this one, just due to the track that it is taking. And even up into Charleston, 1 to 3 feet of storm surge is worth noting for sure. All right, heavy rainfall. Again, that northern eye wall is going to be where we get that heavy rainfall track. So this tells me that the Weather Prediction Center is forecasting a track right through or just south of Tampa Bay. And again, you would get this big banding of heavy rain, likely a foot to a foot and a half of rain in isolated spots here. Again, especially into those northern suburbs, Tarpon Springs, through Spring Hill, up into, again, Orlando, Ocala, even onto the East Coast here, potentially Daytona Beach getting in on more than a foot of rain will be a problem. And you'll notice, again, to the south here, much less rain from Miami, Lake Okeechobee, and down to the Key West area. All right, we do have a tornado threat as well. Really, even starting today, we have a small tornado threat through the southwest coast of Florida. That continues into tomorrow, where it peaks. Really, anyone in and along the I-4 corridor, southbound all the way to the Keys, have a notable tornado threat through the day Wednesday. And then we will continue that into our Thursday as the storm pulls away from Miami up through the East Coast up towards Daytona Beach. Could see a couple tornadoes even back towards Lake Okeechobee Thursday morning into the early afternoon before things probably clear out by Thursday evening. I probably should have moved this one ahead with the rainfall, but excessive rainfall outlook, we do have now the highest level possible, level 4 out of 4 excessive rainfall outlook for Tampa Bay, Orlando, and Ocala, and kind of all points in between. So what does that tell us? Yeah, flash flooding going to be a big time concern. We got ocean water concerns, we got freshwater concerns, we have wind concerns. I mean, again, it's a major hurricane, folks. We're gonna see it all with this one, and I think that's really the big point I want you to take home. All right, well, that's all I got for Milton. I think 25, 26 minutes is hopefully enough time that you got something out of that if you're in the state of Florida. Let's briefly touch on the rest of the country here because, again, we do have some other things to talk about. All right, big time occluded low pressure up near the Hudson Bay into Canada. We've got this big cold front extending back south, and this is what's kind of pulling Milton into Florida, actually, is this cold front. And also, it's going to kind of help with some of that wind shear and dry air as well. We've got all this dry air on the backside of this front that's going to try to move into the storm. So that's kind of that synoptically. Out west, big ridge, again, trough over here. So cold air into the east, warm air out west, good old-fashioned meteorology ongoing there. That could be a common theme through the rest of October. A lot of our models are hinting at more cold fronts working through the east, and we'll touch on that briefly. Watches, warnings, advisories, really nothing happening outside of the state of Florida. Rainfall due to that low pressure and that front, still seeing a lot of rain up into New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and even northeastern Maine getting in on some good rain. Another thing to note, some lake effect precipitation here into upstate New York and into portions of kind of the Toronto area. This will be a theme, I think, really through the coming weeks as a whole. We're going to get a lot of these cold air masses to work over. We're getting into lake effect season through this part of the country. So, that's something we're going to want to talk about a good bit. I think, hopefully, once Milton is gone, and hopefully there's not another storm behind it. Fingers crossed. But really, that's the main thing ongoing radar-wise. Let's take a look at Futurecast through today. And really, the main thing to note is just some lake effect precipitation, and then obviously the state of Florida dealing with those impacts from Milton as kind of the outer bits kind of begin to work on through tonight. But again, do note we do have some lake effect precipitation, and this could be convective in nature, so maybe a little bit of hail or graupel out of this into portions of New York State. They're kind of along Lake Erie. Could see some convective banding there, although not snow, not quite cold enough for that just yet. But that continues through today. Even into the overnight, we continue some lake effect precipitation, and we'll do it all again Wednesday afternoon, actually. We're going to get a kind of reinforcing shot of cold air, and with that, more widespread precipitation through the northeast tomorrow. So kind of just a showery fall-like next couple of days through the northeast as this cold air crosses over the lakes. Out west, really not much. Up into the Pacific Northwest, we do have some showers working on through. But this is tomorrow afternoon, again, through the Seattle area. A couple showers as a little bit of a front tries to swing on through. Other than that, though, I mean, there's really nothing to talk about. High temperatures today, hot out west and into the southern plains, cool up into the east, specifically the northeast. So again, just kind of find your community. Again, very hot down into Southern California and Arizona. Just hot out west in general as that ridge is built back in. Same story for the plains, pretty hot, all things considered for October standards. But once you get into the Midwest, into the east, again, this troughing is really helping to keep things a good bit cooler. And tonight's lows are going to be really nice. We're getting into fall. We've got this big dry air mass, so big diurnal swings in the temperature, meaning warm afternoons, cool mornings. That's really the theme for this entire week. And again, these are tonight's lows. You can pause the video here to find your community, but a lot of us, a lot more fall-like this evening. All right, very briefly want to show this. Again, Milton getting on out of here. The rest of the week stays quiet until this weekend. Look at this. Another front potentially tries to work on through. Kind of a 1-2 punch here. We've got one low pressure that tries to swing on through Saturday through the northeast. That could bring unsettled weather. But behind it, another area of low pressure tries to develop, and we get a big-time cold air mass. This would be the biggest cold shot of the year so far, up into the Great Lakes, into the northeast, and this would probably even slide into the southeast a little bit. And this could bring our first snow lake effect event, I think, of the year. And by this point, we'll be into the middle of October. So you'll notice that, and then even some more low pressure forming along the diverging side of that trough. And I mean, this is cold air getting south, like really far south. See this 540 line? This is getting down into Virginia and North Carolina. That's our freezing isotherm for the column. So probably not quite below freezing for low temperatures, but we're going to get down into the 40s and 30s for some folks with an air mass like that, potentially about a week or so from now. All right, so that's what I got for you folks. Again, hopefully the video was of use to you. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you take home something out of it. And yeah, so all right, stay safe out there. Continue to come back for more updates, and I will see you all next time.